Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to my live stream. I'm going to be finishing up my Halloween painting that I actually started last week. So if you joined me last week, welcome. So excited for you to be here and to come back. I'm going to be finishing up the flowers. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Lisa. Welcome. I'm so excited for you to be here. So I am an oil painter, and I'm going to be demonstrating a technique called impasto painting. So impasto painting is when you lay on thick applications of paint. It's often in a looser style. Now, I've painted the face of the pumpkin here in that style. It's still a little bit tighter than I would have liked it, so I'm going to try to, again, continue to loosen up and have less of a tight structure when it comes to my painting here. Now, a couple things about this painting in general. This was a setup that I created from a gift that my daughter made for me. So she carved this pumpkin for me, put the flowers into it, and gave it to me for my birthday. And I thought it was just absolutely such a fabulous representation of her. And so I wanted to capture it. I wanted to capture it in an oil painting. So I placed this pumpkin in my still life box. If you're curious how to make your own still life box, I've got a video on my channel that you can go ahead and check out. I'll make sure to link it after we're done going live today. And I was excited by the way that I was able to place this pumpkin in my still life box to get a really cool lights and shadows, get really nice reflections. I love the way that this light is reflecting in here. It just creates that nice backlit glow. So I've pre-mixed all of my paint. Let me just toggle off my image here. So I've gone ahead and I've pre-mixed all of my paint. The approach that I'm planning on taking here is to really start with my shadows, my darker shadows, and then build my lights on top of that. Now, when working with thicker paint like this, I always kind of like to lay in my shadows a little bit of a thinner pass, not like super thin, but just an even pass of paint. And then I like to layer my lights on top of that. And so it prevents less contamination. Because I'm going in really nice and thick and bold with my lights, you're less likely to get contamination if you paint your shadows in first. So I want to make sure that I get those into place and then really start to place those bolder lights on top of it. Yeah, so let's jump into it. I think I'm going to start with this gorgeous yellow flower that's right there, and I can just pop up this image here. I am going to need that because I don't actually have a printed image with me. Typically I like to work off of a printed image, but because this was kind of just an impromptu thing, when I took a picture of it, I was like, oh, I just absolutely love this, and it was so fitting that it was right close to Halloween, so I wanted to just jump in and dive in and paint this. So I haven't had a chance to print it out. Typically I work from a printed reference, whereas here I'm using a digital reference. So I'm actually just going to set up, I have my whole setup here for going live and everything else like that. I'm very new to going live. This is only my second live that I've ever done. So if you're here, give me a shout out, please. I'd love to hear your comments in the chat as I go through this. And please be gracious with me as we figure this system out. So I'm actually just gonna, I have my laptop down here. So if I'm looking away, my chat and everything is down here on my laptop. So please, I do need to figure out a slightly better system for all of this, but we'll figure it out. So I just want to make sure that I can pull up my reference image here. And apologies for not having this ahead of time. So I'm just going to have this here. Perfect. So where do I want to start with this? Now with the flowers, there we go. And then make sure I pop up my chat here because I want to make sure I can see anybody that's chatting. All right, so with the flowers, we've got some of these really nice subtle shadows. We've got these bright yellow flowers, and so the shadows are not like super dark because they're in a lighter object. And so we've got some of these shadows in here. Again, I'm going to try not to be super... Oftentimes I'll get really locked into like every line has to be perfect and every shape has to be exactly where it needs to be. But I want to try to loosen this up even further than what I've painted this one as. So we'll see what we can do here. Now on my palette, let me just remove this image here. On my palette, you can see here that I've got this is my general light for my flower. This is kind of my highlight. You'll see there's not much of a difference between them. They're actually really quite close in value, and that's on purpose. Again, I didn't want to pull that value range or that contrast too far. I wanted to keep it controlled. I feel like it got a little bit bright on my pumpkin, and so I wanted to make sure that I'm not going too bright too fast. And then I have my shadow for my flowers are actually here. And so you can see it's fairly light, or it's fairly light in terms of a shadow value. So I'm going to start there, and I just work in oil paints. I do work with Old Holland paints. Those are my go-to paints that I like working with. This is painted on a linen canvas. I absolutely love linen. I love working on linen. It's nice and smooth. I feel like it still grabs the paint quite well, but it gives me personally just the best results. So I always work on linen, and then with Old Holland oil paints. I do have a couple of Winsor Newton colors on my palette that I also have just incorporated over the years. And that's kind of the paints that I am working with. And then I also have some Old Holland brushes and some Simply Simmons brushes, which is a really nice, like, more cost-effective alternative to some of the more expensive brushes, but I find they do a really great job. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's see what we can do here. So again, actually, yeah, no, all good. I'll get double guessing myself here. Okay, so I want to go in, and we've got some shadows that are happening in here where we've got these layered leaves. And again, I don't want to be too particular. Sorry if I bump my microphone, it's kind of right in the way here. Don't want to be too particular about edges here because I'm going to go in with nice thick brush strokes for my lights. I just want to make sure that I have some of this shape here because this is a daisy. It's not just like one layer of leaves. It's got a couple of layers of leaves that are layered on top of each other. So there's some shadows underneath and things like that that are happening. A little bit of light that's poking out with some of this. So let's get some shadow in here and in here. Now I'm going to have to go in afterwards, and I'm going to have to recreate my cast shadows on the pumpkin. I didn't really pay attention to that while I was painting my pumpkin. So I want to make sure that I'm going in and adding that afterwards because that's going to help to better describe the form of the pumpkin, right? Its cast shadows are when the light is blocked from an area and it casts a shadow. So kind of like if you're standing and the sun is shining on you, you're casting a shadow on the sidewalk behind you because that area is blocked from the light because you're standing in the way. So cast shadows are a great way to explain that something is blocked from the light. So right, these flowers are blocking this area of pumpkin from the light. So important to make sure that to get those, and that just helps to further explain form when you're working. Okay, so we've got that in here. We've got a little bit of a shadow in here. We've got some shadows that come in here. Now I don't want to, again, if you caught my first stream, what I was trying to do with this was to paint a little bit in a looser style. I have been painting recently, but it's been a very controlled style, very detail oriented, very particular about my edges, very particular about making sure that every single value and color is represented. And it was, well, I love working that way, I'm not gonna lie. I love getting into absolutely unnecessary detail sometimes. I need to snap my brain out of that sometimes and just play around a little bit. So this was an attempt to play a little bit and just let that enjoy playing with paint for a bit. So we'll see if I can achieve that. I feel like I was still pretty tight and controlled with my pumpkin. Okay, and then we have a couple of flowers in the back here. Let me actually just pop up the reference here again so everyone can see what I'm talking about. And if you're here and if you're watching, please drop a note in the chat. It would be great to hear from you. So we do have a couple of flowers in the back here, but most of those look like they're in the light. So we have a little bit of shadow on this side here, and then just a little bit where we kind of pop in there. And then got quite a bit in there. And again, trying not to get too rigid with it. Now we've got a shadow that cuts across here. Yeah, a shadow, that kind of a cast shadow from a petal It cuts across there, so let's make sure we get that into place. And then there's actually a flower in the back here that is also a shadow. Now this flower in here, because it's really nice and like tucked back under the rest of those flowers, it is getting darker in terms of value. So I want to make sure that I've picked up on my palette here. You'll see that for my shadows, this is my lighter shadow, I've got a slightly darker shadow, and then I've got an even darker shadow in there. So I wanted to make sure that I had that to be able to best represent this area in here, because again, that flower in the back there is a yellow flower, but it's tucked up behind everything else, so the shadows are going to be darker. So I'm going to grab some of that darker value on there and just make sure we're getting this in here and just representing some of those petals. We always want to make sure that I can't grab paint and talk at the same time, apparently. Always want to make sure that we're paying attention to what's going on, but we also don't want to add too much detail in our shadows. Shadows by nature are less detailed than our lights, and so it's important to make sure to not add too much detail into your shadows, because it's going to detract from where I want the attention to go, which is the bright light of those flowers. So while I want to have a little bit of variation, I have, you know, 3 different colors that I've got for my my shadow on this side. I don't want to get too much detail in there, so that's why I'm keeping it kind of an even pass of paint. I do have a little bit of texture going on here, but for the most part, I want it to be a nice even pass of paint and not as much detail. So let's go in and get this. We've got a little petal that's over here that's strayed. And then this little triangle is actually the shadow of the pumpkin, because we've got the leaves going through. So I'll make sure that I do that once I go back in and I fix up this cast shadow. So we want to, again, I'm going to put the reference up here so you guys can see what I'm seeing while I'm creating this, because I want you to be able to see what it is that I'm trying to represent with each of these different values and brush strokes. I think that's helpful. I really enjoy that when I'm watching other people paint. I like to see what it is that they're seeing and how they're interpreting it. So if that's helpful for you, just let me know if you enjoy that as well. All right, so again, now I don't want to get too fixated. I do want to make sure that I use the back of my knife here and pull back in, because again, this is daisies, and so we've got rounded petals. We're not going to have sharp or feathered edges. So I'm just going to use the side of my brush and just clean up some of those edges just a little bit. And again, just a little bit of variation going on there. Not too much, because again, we want to have more detail in our lights. Now we've got a little bit of light that hits in here. Then we go back into shadow. All right, and then again, just want to give some rounded edges, represent what it is that we're trying to represent daisies and their nice rounded petals. All right. So I want to make sure that I have all of my shadows. Now I do have a little bit more of a deeper recessed shadow in here, and I'm gonna actually go and grab my mall stick, because I'm about to get into something a little bit. I want to make sure that I have somewhere to rest my hand. Again, if you don't know what a mall stick is simply a stick that you can use to rest on the top of your easel and rest your hand on while you paint. So I find it really helpful. I'm left-handed. I find it really helpful to have somewhere to rest my hand. I find that you can use your pinky if you want to rest on your canvas, but I find that it causes me to like overextend my pinky, and then by the end of a painting session, I'll have like almost like carpal tunnel pain. Like it'll really radiate all the way down from my wrist down to my elbow. And so what I found is helpful to avoid that is to use a mall stick and actually use that to rest my hand on. Also too, sometimes I'm not the cleanest painter, and so my hands will get a little bit dirty, and then I don't want to accidentally be placing like a dot of a light into, you know, my background that I've already resolved. So I always just make sure. Now I'm gonna kind of in the way of my microphone here, but just want to represent the fact that there's a recess here between this little thing, and then we've got some slightly darker values where the petals go up. Okay, perfect. Now there is also a shadow value right in the very back here, so I want to make sure that I'm getting that in there as well. And then I can kind of place those lights around it wherever I need to. All right, cool. So now this looks very yellow, very green, but once we get some of that yellow into there, it's going to hopefully make a little bit more sense. And because there is so much greenery in this setting, right, it makes sense that we're bouncing shadows. The shadows will always take on the color of your environment. So if, let's say, you're standing out in the forest and you're taking a picture of a person, of a figure, the shadows on the figure is going to read green, because shadows aren't direct light, they're the absence of light. And so the only light that's actually getting into your shadows is light that's been bounced around your environment and up into your shadow to add that kind of reflection or that ambient light. And so it's always going to take on, because it's bouncing off of trees first, let's say if we're in a forest, it's bouncing off of trees first and then up into your shadow. You'll notice that shadows will always take on the color of the context. And so in this context, we've got a lot of light that's yellow that's bouncing around, but we've also got these leaves up the top here, which are green, and that's gonna reflect into those shadows in there. So something to think about, just a little tidbit if you didn't know that, that shadows will take on the color of the environment. All right, so let's move on. Now I think I want to focus on getting all of my shadows into place and then move on to my lights. So I'm actually just gonna wipe my brush, make sure that I don't have any paint on there, and then I'm gonna move over to my leaves. So I have this really beautiful blue on my palette here, and that's going to be to represent the shadows that I've got going on in my leaves. So when I take a look at this in here, you can see along this side of the leaf, we kind of turn into this like blue. And really what it is it's the black environment, because I put it in a still life box that's black with some of that green and that yellow, and it's creating that blue kind of a tone in my shadows in here. So I wanted to get that into place. Now I was about to do this with a nice small brush, but that's not going to help me to loosen up. If you want to get a little bit looser, grab the biggest brush that you possibly can for the area, and that's going to help. So I'm just going to set this down somewhere where I won't get paint all over myself, and then I'm going to grab a bigger brush. Now, because this is a leaf, we've got nice sharp edges, I'm actually going to grab a square brush. So I'm going to grab this brush in here, and I'm going to use this for my leaves so I can get a nice, it's really the nice width that I want, and I want to make sure that I get just a nice delicious stroke of paint there. So I'm gonna do that. Now how does this work? This kind of curves in like this, and then we come down here, and I didn't quite have enough paint on my brush. Let's grab a little bit more. I am using a little bit of linseed oil, bleached linseed oil from Old Holland to cut my paint with. I find that it helps just to get that paint moving and be just a little bit more pliable and easier to work with. So I am adding just a little bit of linseed oil to my brush to help keep the paint moving. Okay, so we've got that there, and then we go in like this, and there's a little bit of a highlight that just cuts in that ridge. So I'll be able to use the lights to better define the edges of this leaf. So I've got the nice shadow in there. Where else do we have shadows on this? I've got a little bit of a shadow in here where the light is blocking this area, and a little bit of a curve in there. Now this beautiful leaf that's coming out, where did I put that in my transfer? I think it's this one here. there's this beautiful leaf, but it's reflecting off of the top of the pumpkin here, and it's this really nice, gorgeous orange. So I'm excited to that. I don't want to put this blue everywhere because this blue is really quite specific to this side and to these leaves that are right in the center here. So I want to make sure that I'm making sure that I'm keeping the color in the context of where it makes sense. Now there's a bit of a shadow right at the top here where we just kind of curve, the leaf kind of curves like this. And so I want to make sure that that's in place, and most of that will be eaten up by light. Just want to make sure that it starts. And then we have one darker leaf right in the back here. And so I want to get that into place just in here, and it's really kind of the top. It's got a bit of a curved edge, and then we've just got a hit of light. So I'm just going to leave it like that, and then I'll better define that with some light. Perfect. And then I maybe want to set this into the background, just back in here. Now I'm going to put some other colors and values over top of this, but there's some really nice recessed dark shadows that are happening back here, and I want to make sure that I get those into place. I don't ever want to accidentally forget about that, and then you're trying to place lights and you're trying to fill dots of the canvas. I'd much rather just kind of start with, like I said, the background, the darker shadows, and then build on top of it. So if it's not in there in the first place, it's hard to build on top of it. So that's kind of my thinking there, just placing this into some of these darker areas in here. This is where we've got our pink flower. And I do have some darker values just back in here. And I love this gorgeous little pop of blue that's happening. I think it's just such a fun, the way that it plays off of the orange is just really dynamic and fun. So I quite like that. All right. And then I think that's good for this darkest shadow. And I want to move up to maybe my next, because we're starting to get a little bit more green. Over on this side, you can see that even those darker areas are a little bit more green. So I don't want to put this blue anywhere where it's absolutely not necessary. So and we'll see how we're doing. I was hoping to only go live for an hour today, but it's already half an hour's gone, so we'll see how that goes. Okay. Perfect. I'm trying to look for all of the other shadows. Where else do I have shadows? And I feel like the shape of this got a little bit out of place. This comes a little bit more rounded, but I can always go back in. This was just pure black that I used. That I used here. There we go. This is pure black that I used on this side here, so I'll go ahead and I'll use that to kind of clean up that edge. And I'm just gonna make sure that I wipe that off. Okay. So I think that's looking good. Where else do we have shadows? So we have this leaf in here that I want to get in there. And that's with, if you take a look at, where are we here? So I've got that on my palette, just a little bit out of context here. So maybe if I could just move this over. I don't know if you can see, oh no, can't quite see my, there we go. So if I just pull this, hopefully don't disturb the force too much. On my palette here, you can see that I've got some of these burnt oranges and reds, and that's what I'm going to use this leaf. There's just a leaf in there that's caught some of those darker values. I want to move to a different brush because I don't want to have that blue on my brush when I do this. So let me grab this one. This is a nice brush. Again, I'm sticking with some of these flatter brushes. They're a little bit frayed. I've used them quite well. These ones are simply Simmons. There are, you can see on the side there, they're really great brushes. You can find them at Michael's, and I find them to be very economical. So they're great when you kind of blow through brushes, and I always keep my brushes. I always use my brushes. I never throw out brushes. Something feels really weird about throwing out brushes. And so I always use my brushes even after they're slightly frayed and are a little bit harder to use. They're great for scrubbing in backgrounds. They're great for any kind of scrubbing that you need to do. I always find that they're really great for that. So don't ever throw out your brushes. Now I want to go back and put up my reference image here while I do this so I can see where I'm going. So we've just I'm just wiggling the brush down here. We've got a little bit of a bump in there, and then we just it's tucked in behind that leaf there. So we'll go in like that, and then I want to add just a little bit of variation. You'll see that I am using paper towel. I wipe my brushes all the time. I always want to make sure that I'm not bringing one value into the next or contaminating anything. So it's become a real habit, which is a fantastic habit to get into, that every time my brush comes off my canvas, I'm always wiping my brush just to make sure that I'm not accidentally putting something that I didn't know was on my brush. So just want to add just a little bit of this in here, just where the light is kind of picking up that really gorgeous reflection from the pumpkin. So we've got that into place. And then I'm still kind of in my mind trying to figure out how I'm going to handle these fluffier edges, or these fluffy, I don't even know what those are, like some kind of a bulrush or something, I'm not sure. But just how I'm going to handle those, we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when I get there. Sometimes in the process of thinking about it in the back of my mind and then working out the process, it'll all come together. Okay. I think that's everything in terms of my shadows. Now I did want to add some of these more green areas in here back into that area, and I'll show you just on my palette here where I've mixed that color. So you'll see this is the color in here. We've got some of the areas in the back here. These shadows kind of leaned a little bit blue. These ones here were leaning a little bit more green, and so I wanted to make sure that I was representing just that subtle color shift. Now, when I was thinking about painting a lot looser, I still want to make sure that I'm not throwing away my colors or my values. So I'm not just like, oh, being loose with everything. There's still a part of this process that's very controlled. And that for me is my color mixing and my value mixing. Because if your colors and your values are where they absolutely need to be, once you get into your edges can be a little bit looser, right? There's a lot of fantastic artists who have really loose edges, but you can still understand what it is that you're looking at. And that's because of the tight control of color and value. So John Singer Sargent is a perfect example of this. He used the least amount of brush strokes possible. That was kind of like his way of thinking. And the reason why it worked is because he had really nice tight control of his colors and his values. He used what was absolutely necessary in terms of color and value to describe the form of a person or an object or the dresses that he painted. But then it was kind of the least amount of brush strokes to represent that. But because the color and the values were on point, then the edges, you could be a little bit looser with your edges. Okay, so let's grab just a little bit more of this green and get that into place in here. I don't want to disturb this edge, so we're just going to bump that up against there. You can always go back in and reestablish that. Get a little bit of, so if anybody has joined a little bit later, this is a pumpkin that my daughter created for me. She carved this pumpkin and put the flowers in it, and it was something that she gave me for my birthday. I absolutely love homemade gifts. They just warm my heart. And to me, it just looked a lot like her. Like I thought it was just such a fabulous thing, and I really wanted to represent it in a painting. I really wanted to capture it and keep it. And so I'm very excited that I like to decorate for the different holidays. I don't know if you can see just the very edge of it, but I've got a mantle up here in my living room, and I love changing it out for the seasons. And I didn't have a lot to decorate for Halloween, so I thought, well, why not create something that I can decorate for Halloween? And so this is going to be a really fantastic addition to that. Now I want to bridge my shadows here, just in the background with some of this slightly more green. And then again, like I said, we'll lay those lights on top of it, but I want to set the context in there. Now I've got my flower, my pink flower that's going to go in here, and then I've got my leaves. So just trying to set the stage for some of the stuff that's to come to make sure getting it into its nice context. Okay, let me pop back up my photograph here. Yeah, and let's get this darker value. Let's set it right into the bottom here. We do have some lighter values that are coming in here, but I want to make sure that there we go. I'm gonna have to go back in with that purple or that orange and just make sure to reestablish this edge in here. I've kind of lost this edge, but I want to place in all those colors and those values first before I go back in with that, just to reestablish that edge, because that leaf really kind of does stick out from everything else, so those are going to be really sharp edges. Okay, what else? Just looking around my image, trying to make sure that I have everything in place that I want in place before I start moving into lights. And it looks like I do. So before I do that though, I do want to go in and I want to establish this cast shadow, just to make sure that I'm getting that area. And I want to move, I've got a big square brush, but because the cast shadow is of those daisies, I want to work with the filbert because it's going to help me to get those nice rounded edges. And the cast shadow helps to define the form. So the way that the fact that we've got these looped or rounded petals is going to mean that the cast shadow in here is slightly rounded. And you see that at the top of the pumpkin there, we've got slightly rounded cast shadow. So I'm going to use a round filbert just so that I can represent that. I feel like that's a little small. Let's get a little bit bigger. Here we go. So I've gone in and repainted or remixed this color, so let's hope I got a fairly decent match here. Now let's go in and figure out what we've got. So on this ridge here, we're going to have a little bit of a thing like that, and you'll notice how right away that just starts to better define what's under here. So I haven't done anything, all I have is my shadows on my flower here, but even just with that one little stroke in there, you can see how it starts to define, oh, we've got something here that's got looped petals on it. It's got rounded edges, rounded petals. So cast shadows, don't ever discount your cast shadows. They're very, very important and help to define form. So a really important thing to think about. Don't overlook them. It can be a really powerful tool in your tool belt as an artist. All right, so I've just gone in and I've lightened this up just a little bit because our shadows kind of start to open up as I round out the front of the pumpkin here, and so I don't want my shadows to get too dark. And so I'm just using some of this color that I used up in here, just at the very front here. We've got, so this kind of cuts across here, and then we've got a little bit of a rounded there, and another rounded there. And see how this immediately lifts this section up and starts to add definition. And so just really exciting to see that, how it starts to come together. And you can start to see that this area here is now lifted from what's happening on the pumpkin. It just gives it a little bit of space. So we've got a petal in there. And then just a little touch of a petal just right under here. So there we go. Now I also want to make sure that I'm representing where it breaks off in here. So it kind of cuts across there. We've got a nice sharp edge in here. And then it comes down like that. There you go. Let me just go in and reestablish this. Lost the shape of my petal there. There we go. There we go. Okay, and then I'll come in a little bit later and I'll reestablish that edge, because this is supposed to be rounded and I hate how far this one came out, but we can do that in a little bit. Okay, cool. So I'm loving that. There is a little small nip of a cast shadow on this side here, so I want to get that into place. It's just a little one there, and then just a little hint of one just there. So I just want to make sure that I get that in place now, because I don't want to have to touch that after. So see how this just immediately lifted the flowers right up off of the pumpkins, simply by defining a cast shadow. Okay, so now that I've got all of that into place, let's now go in and let's start playing with our lights. Let's get wild with it. Actually, that's a lie. My pink flower. So I want to make sure that I get the shadows of my pink flowers into place first. See, I tried to rush and then I got all. So again, let's see if I can move my palette just a little bit further over here. Oops. Try not to knock over all my cameras, but you can see that I've got it looks a little bit orange on the camera, but this is my shadow that I've got for my carnation that's stuck in there. So I want to grab my brush and let's make sure I get my shadows for that carnation into place before I move on to my lights. Okay, so let's see where we've got. This shadow kind of comes down over here. Actually, I think this is that edge. I already defined that. So I'm trying to be thoughtful about the way that I'm painting this, going in. I don't want to just go in and be loose. I'm still being thoughtful about the way that I'm doing it, making sure that I still have, again, because I want to actually represent the flowers, I want to make sure that I'm still representing the shapes that I'm seeing. So I want to be thoughtful. I want to be loose but thoughtful. And then we've kind of got, so the way the flower kind of cuts across in here, and I've grabbed a slightly lighter value, but it's still kind of in my shadows, and I'm going to darken this just slightly over here. You can see that I'm trying to still pay attention to where are my shadows, where are my lights, and then it kind of cuts in over here. And I've picked up a little bit of my blue there, so I want to make sure that I'm wiping that off my brush. Yeah, I should just go in and reestablish that. That edge. There we go. So we've got some shadow that comes up. Whoops. Comes up in here. It cuts across here. A little bit of shadow in the back here. And it really moves from, if you look in this area over here, so you can see how there's like a really distinct kind of a darker edge in here. We kind of move gradient up over here as it like, as a whole, as it kind of rolls. So there's a shadow, darkest shadow right in here, starting to get slightly lighter. And then as I add my light, it's going to be over here. And then there's going to be a highlight right over here. And that's just going to allow to show the fact that we've got a shadow and then it rolls, it rolls into light. And that's going to help to define that area and give it nice, it's going to give it volume. Okay, and then make sure I get my shadow down in here. I'm loving the way these colors are playing against each other, like just such a fun color palette. I was having a lot of fun mixing my colors today, just seeing all the different variations in colors. I did try to keep my shadows cooler than my lights. I've got a nice warm light on this. The pumpkin's this gorgeous warm color. So in contrast, I tried to keep my shadows a little bit cooler to represent, because our shadows are always going to be less colorful than our lights. They're going to be darker in value, and they're always often going to be the opposite temperature of our lights. And they're also going to hold less detail. All right, so there we go. Kind of starting to get some of that form in there, and then that'll finish out when I get the light. This here is a flower or a leaf, so I want to get that in there. I've kind of got a nice light stroke in there. Oh, I'm excited to put that one in. Okay. And that's good. Get some of that. And there's just a little bit of shadow value down in here as well too. I want to get in. And again, so right now I'm just building in my shadows, filling in my shadows, and then I'll start to place my lights over top of those and really start to bring this together. And if you were here for my first live, if not, you can go ahead and check it out. It's on my channel now. You can go ahead and see when I was painting the pumpkin, how it really started to come to life as soon as we started to lay in that light, because we start to just kind of, with much nice thicker strokes, you can really start to see it come together quite quickly. Okay, let me just grab a sip of water here. Okay. Perfect, so let's get some of these lights in here. Now I want to kind of build up from the back to the front. So I'm going to start with this back in here, and then I'm going to move front, 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 and hopefully that will help me just to make sure that my edges, I can define whatever's in front of something. So I want to start with whatever's the furthest back. So we've got these kind of, I don't even know what they are, some kind of like a wild type of a leaf or a flower or something here. You can see if I enlarge this, it's some kind of really great like wildflower type of a seedling or something. I don't even know, like I couldn't even guess. Maybe some horticulturists in the crowd could let me know. Okay, so always starting again, thinking about my darkest, moving up to my lightest. So on my palette, what do I have for these colors? Now, if I can move this back a little bit, hopefully it doesn't take my camera with it. I've got some of my, bam. I've got some of my lighter values over here. So these are kind of my browns and my beiges. I'm going to leave those beiges for the last. That's kind of the thing that I want to put on top of it. But I've got some of my greens. They're here. There's some vibrant greens that are happening, and then some lighter values as well too. So I want to make sure that I can get those. This is the lightest that I wanted to get. So I put that on my palette to be like, hey, well, this is as bright as we're going, no brighter. Don't want to push my, my lights too bright. If I need to, I can always do that afterwards, but I always find I don't want to go too light too fast, because that's something that, especially working in this technique, it's a little harder to pull back from because you're laying in the lights so thick. So cautious, we're cautiously moving forward. Okay, so let's put this back on here, and let's start with some of our darker values. Now I want to go in and I'm going to use this brush in here. It's a nice angled brush. I want to, because we've got a lot of like lines that are coming straight down, we've got some stems and then some leaves that kind of like spray out from it. So I'm thinking about my brushes while I'm considering what brushes are going to be the best to get the best technique. Again, because I'm not like going in super detailed. I'm not painting every single leaf or every single bud that I see. I want to be a little bit more representational with it. I feel like this is going to give me a good chance to get that. Okay, so let's go in with some of these lighter values, and I'm loading up my brush, not a lot, just kind of on the tip. You can see I've got a little bit more on that side, and I'm just conscious of the edges that I'm seeing. So I want to get some of these sticks into place. kind of start and build off of there. So if I get some of these in there with the general shapes, this is kind of curved. And like that. And then this one kind of comes over like this. And again, it's going to blend a little bit with the paint that I already have down. That's cool. I love that. Starts to just make the piece a little bit more cohesive and brings a little bit of variation, right? The fact that this stem is a little bit darker than this stem is just all a part of the wonderful fun of it. And then I do have some stuff that's going on there. Now I have some slightly lighter things that are going on here, so I'm going to wait. I'm not quite at that stage yet. This is still quite dark, so I want to hold off on that. Let's just push this up. We want to make sure that I'm able to cover. I didn't have any of my background here, so I'm just going to make sure that I cover all the whites of the canvas here while I get to that stage, because I left it blank. So I want to make sure that I'm going to fill that in, because I don't want to have to go back in and try to work around it with my background. Okay. So now I've got a couple of different greens on my palette here, so I want to make sure I'm getting some variety, and so I'm just going to show where the fact that we've got our leaves that are kind of coming out from those. Got some, just playing around with the angle of my brush to see what's going to give me the best result, what's going to give me the look that I'm going for. And now you can see we're starting to get something to build off of. We've got some stocks and bonds here. And I want to fill this in because this is actually quite a dense area. There's a lot of things there, so I want to build that area up a little bit. And we're just going to bring this green here across here. I'm going to go in and I'm going to layer some of the browns and the beiges on top of that, just laying in a base. I think I'm going to go in with a little bit of this blue here and just establish some stuff back here. It's a little indistinguishable about what's going on here, but I think just getting some of that shadow value in that area is going to be helpful. Oh, sorry. Hopefully my camera's back to being in focus. Yeah, and then let's bring in this value in back in here. Kind of got some darker green. Right, feeling good about that. I do want to fill in this white of the canvas. It's just kind of driving me crazy, so I'm just going to go in and just fill this in here and kind of give this a little bit more bulk. Again, this area is quite bulked up in here. There's just little slips of the light showing through or seeing through to the background, so go in and do that. And I also want to make sure that I'm bringing this out a little bit, so we're getting that kind of nice curve on it, the fact that this is curving out this way, and then we've got some nice lines that are going out here. There we go. And then we have a little bit of greenery that's happening just on this side of this leaf, so I want to get that in there. I don't know if you could even see that, but just placing a little bit of the green that's in there. Okay, awesome. Now let's grab my brush, and I'm going to go in and just reestablish some of these darker shadows in here, just to get some variation in my edges, just to bring some of this back a little bit. I'm just using the edge of my angle there just to reestablish that. There we go. Okay. Cool. And then we've got just a little touch of some of that darker shadow in there. Awesome. All right, let's move up to, I'm going to grab a new brush, and I want to change now from that angle. I want to move into a little bit of a more round brush, a filbert, because again, I'm thinking about, this is a nice good one. I'm thinking about, where am I? There we go. I'm thinking about the edge, the final edge that I want to get, and we kind of have these like buds, almost like they're, I don't know if they're like dandelions, you know, when you like, they're white and you blow them off, there's kind of that fuzzy, it's almost like what it looks like. And so I want to make sure that, because it's nice and round, I want to have a round brush. I want to think about the end result that I'm looking to get. So I'm moving up to a slightly lighter green, and I'm just going to establish some of the stalks. You can just see, perhaps this wasn't the best. No, it's good. We're just going to get a nice sharp edge on it. So I've just placed the paint on it so I got a nice sharp edge on the brush. And I'm just going to go in and represent some of these where the stalks got a little bit highlighted. Now I always have to be careful because my brain likes to go into patterns, and I always have to just make sure that I'm not following a distinct pattern. Nature is very random, seemingly, and so I want to make sure that I'm not getting too patterned with it, not ending up putting everything in the same direction, and that's going to help make it look a little bit more realistic. No, I don't necessarily have any great tips or tricks on how to stop yourself from being too too uniform. Just what I found is helpful to me is just to change the position of my brush. If I notice that I'm putting in strokes like this, it's going to start to get really patterned, and so I'll notice that I'll have to like move my brush around to different ways, and that's what usually helps me break out of that patterned approach. It's just dolloping some paint on, getting some variation in there. Again, I'm not at my brightest values yet. I'm still just kind of building the underlayer for this area, making sure I'm trying to cover all the white of that canvas, get that absolutely gone. Still being mindful of where I see this value. I don't see it everywhere, so I want to be very cautious with it, but I do see it in quite a few places. Now there's a nice little stalk that's going on here, so I want to just get that into place. Over there, and then I've got a little bit of one right over here. Just there we go, and then just gonna push a little bit, put a little bit of some lighter values in here. Now I've moved the position of my brush. I've got quite a bit more paint on there, and I want to come at it like this so I can actually lay some thicker paint on to start to add and build up some of the texture that we're seeing here. So I just want to break up some of the shadowed area in here and kind of notice how it's starting to push those shadow values back into the recesses. It's kind of setting them back into their context as I'm starting to build some of these lighter values over top. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. Again, I don't want to overwork this. I'm trying to purposely cut myself off so that I'm not overworking it, but I do have some of those lighter values that push just a little bit further up here. So I want to make sure that I'm getting those into place as well. Now it kind of gets a little bit more brown up at the top here, so I'm leaving a little bit of space for that with a little bit more of that beige in there, and then I've got this nice little stalk shoot that's sticking out there, and I want to be just very delicate with that, just kind of give hints of it. And then we do have some of these lighter values that are happening in here, so we've got a little bit of a lighter edge just under here. And I have to say, I always feel like when I get to this stage, I'm always kind of like, oh my goodness, is this going to come together? Is this going to work? And then once I start laying in my lights, I'm always like, okay, yeah, we've got this. It's going to be okay. I've done the work, the foundational work. It's going to work itself out. All right. And then I just want to add, I just got a little too patterned. So let's add some variation there. Perfect. And then, yeah, I think we also have another, let's do another leaf that comes in like that, little branch. Okay, so now I'm going to go in. I'm just going to try to keep using this brush, and I'm going to wipe it really well, try to get some of that green off there. If there's a little bit of green into this brown, that's okay. It unifies and ties together the painting. Just kind of come in with this, start to add some of these brown. And now this is very, very close in value, so I'm actually just going to lighten it just slightly. Again, don't want to get too light because it's really not picking up here on the, perfect. I just want to dapple this in here. And it's kind of actually like little splotches. I'm getting like, there we go. Getting little lines, and I don't want lines, I just want, yeah. So you see, we're kind of like mixing and mulling everything underneath, so it's all kind of working itself out. We're not getting anything that's too like super definable, but we've still got some nice spots in there. Now I want to get some of these up in here. I've got some branches that come out here. And then they kind of recede into this shadow, so we'll get that in there. And again, I'm still not at my brightest lights here yet. I'm still just building slowly towards them. But as you can see, we're getting into this shadowed side here, which this side is a little bit more shadowed. You're seeing that these values are having much more of an impact, right? So I want to be sparse with them. I don't want to be too liberal with them because there's just a few places where the light hits. But we've got kind of got some light happening in there. It's just got a hit of something there. Perfect. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. I do want to bring some of this just over here a little bit. There you go. Cool. Now, if I need to, I might go back in with some of this. I have actually some brighter yellow or some brighter green with a little bit, it's got a little bit more, can add a little bit more of the yellow to it. Just to come in and reestablish any of these bright hits of light that are in here. I want to make sure I capture those highlights. But I'm going to wait because they may not be looking bright simply because this is white. And so I want to make sure that I get that carnation into place before I start to determine values, because I can start to second guess myself, but it's because there's still white on the canvas showing through. So I'm not really seeing the way that those true values are playing the true relationship between those values. Okay, cool. Do have a little bit of there's some kind of a deep green that's in here that I wanted to get into place. There we go. And then let's bring this brown just down into here a little bit. There we go. Okay, cool. I'm loving where this is at right now. So I want to, I don't want to go in with my highlights just yet. I think I want to actually get that carnation into place, and then these leaves, and just kind of see what this looks like. Now I do want to go in and actually use my brown here to define the edge of this leaf. So this leaf kind of comes like this, like that, and like that. Or the light just hits the ridge of that leaf. I don't want to do too bright of a color. I'm using my brown that I've used. It's kind of my mid-tone brown. For this area here, if I need to add any more of a highlight, I can always go back in and do that. And then I also have a leaf here that's capturing the light here as well too, so it just comes in like that. There we go. Okay. Awesome. All right, let's get that carnation now. I promise myself, get a little bit looser. Loosen up. So I'm going to, I have a bucket full of all of my brushes, and so always look for the right one that I'm looking for. So this is the one I'm looking for. It's a smaller angled brush, and I want to use it to place in my carnations. So I'm not jumping right away into my brightest lights. I'm just, you see I've loaded up quite a bit of paint on that brush, and I'm just going to go in, and again I'm going to use a grip like this rather than a grip like this. I'm going to use a grip like this, and I'm just going to place in some of the areas where I'm starting to see, oops, this brighter light. And again, I don't want to be too precious with it because I want to represent the nice texture of a flower. So I'm going to go in with this mid value, and I'm going to place it in here, and then I will place those highlights on top of it. Now I'm moving the way that I'm changing the way that I'm holding my brush because I don't want to get into patterned strokes. I don't want to make sure that everything is one way. It starts to get too uniform. So I do want to make sure that I'm holding my brush a slightly different way. I'm just gonna, oh, there we go. Get in here, get this into here. You see, there's not a lot of variety yet because I still just have one color. Like I've got my shadows in, but now this is one light. But the fact that I'm using my texture adds an element of it. When I go in with the highlight, then it's gonna, again, create even more texture and deliciousness. So I've got quite a bit of paint loaded up onto that brush. Hopefully you can see that there. There's quite a bit of paint loaded on there. I'm just gonna try to vary my brush strokes and leave that nice delicious texture. Now I've got a little bit of contamination, so I'm just gonna go in and clean that up. And you can see it's starting to give that nice kind of rough feel of a flower, right? We've got some varied edges. It's not going to be the nice rounded edges that we have for our daisies here, but we've got this nice kind of crunchy feel of a carnation where the edges are a little bit rough and spiky, but they're all kind of tightly knit together. I want to make sure I push into that shadow just a little bit so I'm not getting any of the canvas showing through there. And then we do have, sorry if my chair is squeaky today. So I've got a leaf here, and then I've got a leaf here, and there's just a little pop of pink that happens on this edge. So I want to get that into place there. Just to really set that flower into its context there. Perfect. Now it's mixed a little bit with some of those shadows, which is just gorgeous. I love the play of that, so I'm not going to touch it anymore. I'm just going to leave it. I do have a little bit where I lost a little bit of my shadow here, so I'm just going to go in and reestablish that on that edge. But other than that, I don't want to mess with it too much because it's really starting to get that nice, gorgeous feel of a flower. So I'm going to go in and place in my leaves over here before I go in and place in any highlights. I kind of want to bring everything together all at once, so I'm not going to go in with my highlights just yet. And so what I want to do with my leaves, I want to try to be a little bit bigger with my brush strokes here. Now I've got some of this. This isn't quite my darkest colors yet, but I want to leave some space to get lighter. So I'm just going to try to get nice and big with my brush strokes here and give a nice curl to that leaf. We have a little bit of a darker side on this side, so here we go. We're just trying to create some texture. Now this leaf does come at a sharp edge like this, so I want to flip my brush so I can get a nice sharper edge. We have a bit of a gradient, right? Like I did put this shadow value coming from the top of the leaf where it kind of curls like that. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of my shadow value and I'm just going to come over the top of it like this, and I just want to see how it just blending it down just slightly. I'm going to wipe my brush and just grab my shadow. And again, do the same thing on here so I can keep my edge nice and tight. But I just pull it down and it just creates a little bit of a gradient there. Kind of shows that the light is going from shadow kind of into light as it's hitting that leaf. Now I want to clean up this edge just a little bit. And we're going to grab my shadow brush again here and just clean up that edge. So there we go. I like the way that that's looking. Now we do have a little bit of a lighter, this side of the leaf is slightly lighter than this side. So I want to go in with another, again, a slightly lighter value and just grab it like this. Trying not to get too tight with this. Just add a little bit in there. Let's get this side a little lighter. Now I've kind of lost my nice soft edge there, so I'm just going to go back in with a slightly darker and just keep playing with this until, there we go, it starts to kind of blend away. So now we've got a slightly lighter side. I can get a little bit darker on this side. Just a nice ridge like that. Perfect. Okay, and then this flower in here. Let's see if we can do this in one stroke. I've kind of varied the paint that's on there. I've got some lighter, some darker, and I just want to go in and I just want to establish this flower just like that. Just carve it right in there. Now it's a little bit darker in value than that, so I'm going to go in with some slightly darker paint in here and just pick up that edge there, and then it comes out like this. And then we've got Another little leaf that's slightly lighter that's set in here. It's actually quite light, so. Bring it in like that. Perfect. So I don't want to, I've got too many brushes in my hand. It's a bad habit of mine. All of a sudden I'll have like 7 brushes in my hand. So I want to go back in and no, I'm not going back into my flower. Stopping myself. Don't do it. Okay, so next, what am I going to do? I want to go back into this leaf here. I just want to reestablish this sharp edge. Here we go. Okay. And now we're going to move into our yellows. Now everything is still a little bit muted because I haven't gone in with my highlights yet. And you'll see hopefully once I do the highlights for everything, it's really just going to it's really going to pull together. One thing I've noticed I forgot here, this leaf, it curls around, this is in shadow, but then it twists into the light. We've got a little hit of light that's happening here. But just a very little hit and it's mostly shadow. So I'm actually just going to grab this slightly darker here. And you'll see that this kind of comes in like this. Goes in like that. Perfect. And then, oh, you know what? One thing I forgot. Oh, just hold on a second. See, my kids just came home from school. Let me just pause this for a second. Here we go. Okay, so what did I say? Oh yes, my shadow on my pumpkin. I forgot to paint this in. Here we go. Now this is quite a bit darker because we've got a real nice recess in here, so I just want to establish this edge just nice and dark. There we go. Okay, so let's move on to, oh, we've got a leaf in here, so I want to make sure I get this leaf in here. Actually, let's paint the yellow back in here and then do the leaf, and then let's get to our yellow in there. I think that's going to be the better way forward. What did I just say? I said we're going to do the yellow, and then we're going to do the leaf, green leaf, and then we'll finish off with the yellow flower in there, and then really get our highlights in. I think I'm going to wait to do these. I'll maybe do that. I'll figure out a way to do that. Okay, so yellow, I'm going to grab a fresh brush. And I'm going to grab some yellow. So just want to go in and just be nice and bold with this. Don't want to have nice rounded edges. So again, I'm using a filbert, which is a nice rounded brush. Still loading up the brush the way that I typically would. I want to hold it like this so that I can get a real nice angle and kind of be able to just establish the paint and then pull it back and hopefully get a nice rounded edge on there. That didn't quite work because this brush is a little bit used. It's been well used. Okay, let's go in, keep working this. I'm using the texture of the paint. I hope it's maybe a little hard to see with the webcam that I have here, but I am creating some texture, so maybe I'll take a photograph of this and I'll put it onto my community page for anybody that wants to see this a little bit with a little bit more detail. I can show you some of the texture that's happening in here because it can be slightly hard to see it. Now I think I got a little bit mixed up in that's okay. Just establish this edge in here. Now this is a sharp edge, so I want to make sure I'm getting that sharp edge in there. Still paying attention to where I have sharp edges, what's rounded, right? The fact that my leaves are rounded, I want to make sure that I'm getting that into place. And then really build up the color in here. And I've got a little bit of shadow in there, so maybe I'll go in with a little bit of shadow value. From the leaves, just to show where we've got some hits of shadow under there. So not too much, just want to keep it just a little bit. Okay, and then, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to, there's actually, before I do that, there's some leaves under here that I want to, this is kind of hard for me because typically I would like rotate my canvas and I can't quite do that because of camera angles, but there, I just want to grab a nice little suggestion of a leaf there. And there's, we had some cast shadows under there, so I wanted to show that there is a leaf that's represented by that cast shadow there. Okay. So I'm going to grab my shadow or my leaf value. Now this value, this leaf is in the light, so I'm going to go in here and create this leaf as it sits in here, clean up any contamination that I'm seeing, make sure I'm getting some nice sharp edges. There we go. Cool. All right, and I've got a little bit of a lighter hit just in here, so I want to represent that. Here we go. So I've got that into place, and now I just want to get my yellow, my most prominent yellow daisy here into place, and then I will go in with some highlights and just really kind of hopefully bring this all together. So going back to just one brush in my hand and going in with, now I want to do the leaves in the way that I've got my shadows, so I just want to pull this into the shadow, and hopefully that will contaminate a little bit with what's underneath. And so it'll be a smoother, make sure I get a nice rounded edge, bring that in. Now I don't want to like go in and just do like a whole rounded edge, right? Because that's not going to look like a real flower. Like I mentioned before, the petals are kind of interlaced, and so they're kind of at different levels, and so I want to make sure that I'm not getting too stuck in with that. It's going to start to look really fake, so I want to make sure that I'm just trying to follow what I'm seeing where we're getting hits of light. We've got some petals in the back here. You'll see just how it really starts to pull together when you start getting rid of all the white of the canvas. It's always a very exciting step for me as an artist to get rid of all the white of that canvas. I always feel really good about that. All right. Okay. There we go. Some of these petals. I may need to go in with some of my shadow and just reestablish some of those shadow areas, but just going to keep going with my lights here. trying not to lose the shape that I have here. Again, trying to represent what it is I'm seeing in the reference. I don't want to stray from the reference, especially with flowers. It can be really easy to get into the habit of just like, oh, I'll just make a, I'll just make a circle all the way around with petals, but then it starts to lose its realness, or it strays from reality. And so I don't want to do that. Now we've got a petal that comes out like this, and that's where we've got that cast shadow. Trying to work backwards in to try to keep those rounded edges. There you go. All right, just make sure that I clean up my leaf here. Didn't quite get big enough. Cover up all of that. So I'm going to just make sure that I'm bringing that leaf in like that. And this is going to come in like that. There we go. Got a little bit more definition in there. Perfect. All right, so I just want to step back because if I get too close to it, then I can't quite see it for what it is. So I want to make sure that I'm seeing all of my shapes the way that I have it. So I'm just going to get that center nodule into place and then kind of work with some of my shadows to bring back up some of that definition. So with this, I'm just going to place this light kind of everywhere, and then I'll go in with my shadow and reestablish it. It really is like a button, and so we've got light and shadow that's happening on one side, and a gradient. But for right now, I'm just going to start with a circle, and then I'm going to go in with my shadow. Make sure I'm not getting too dark, but we've got a shadow that's happening here on this side. And then as we're reset that in, and then we're just got a little bit dark. Put it in like that, and then I'm going to go in and reestablish some light in here. Take back some of that space. There we go. And then I just also want to grab a little bit of a hit of light. Some of this yellow in here. Let's come at it from this angle. Just really grab a lot on my brush there, just to, there we go. Give it that little a bit of a button. Now I want to go in and, like I said, reestablish just a little bit of this shadow. I feel like I lost some of the shadow of this flower. That really kind of gives it some definition, so I don't want to lose that. And then shadow in there, just live. And then where else can I go in with some shadow? Come across like that. I've got some shadow that comes in like that. Okay, so it kind of got in a little bit messy with my shadows. Again, I wanted to have those established, like I mentioned before, first, and then lay the lights on top of it. Got a little bit messed up in that area, so I'm just gonna go in here, and we need to mix just a little bit more of my yellow because I've lost a little bit of that yellow. So I'm just gonna, where's my palette knife? What did I do with my palette knife? My palette knife is one of those, oh, here it is. One of those things that I'll like lose it and it'll be like, I don't understand, how did that happen? Oh, I've got some dark values in there. Let's get that out of there. Grab some white. My yellow was basically just shev yellow with quite a bit of titanium white into it, just to dull it down. I didn't want the yellow here, while it's a vibrant yellow, it's not actually as bright as I thought it would be. It's actually quite a muted yellow. It's not as like chromatic because it's a pale white, pastel white type of flower. So I'm just gonna load up a whole bunch of that on my brush and just try to reestablish, put my photograph back up here and just kind of reestablish some of these petals. Really bring this flower home, hopefully. Now I do want to bring this petal here, needs to come out quite a bit more. There we go. And then we just have some petals that just kiss the light here. I don't know if I'm doing it with this. I don't know if I'm doing this flower justice, but we'll keep figuring it out. So I think it's just this. Let's figure that out. Maybe like that. Getting there. I think we just have too much shadow here along the bottom. So I want to, this kind of comes like this. We've got a petal right here. Petal right there and a petal right there. There we go. So now I just want to go in and just reestablish this blue or vibrant green in here. Just, we got a little bit messy. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Oh yeah, there was a little bit of just a touch of light that hits. Let's see if we can do this. You can always go in and reestablish our shadow. Just a little petal like that of where the light hits there. And then a tiny touch of light in there. And then if I reestablish that. Okay, cool. Now let's go in and add some highlights. So I do have some highlights for my flower, I think, which is also going to help just kind of pull it together. get rid of some of these, so hold on a second. This yellow I feel like is a bit of a disaster. There we go. Okay. Don't get too bogged down by it. Don't get too bogged down by it. And then we'll flip this up. There we go. Whew. There we go. That's feeling better. Although this shadow still kind of bothers me. Just this shadow in here. Let's kind of interrupt this with a wider leaf. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Cool. So now let's go in with some highlights. So again, I'm going to grab a fresh brush because I want to make sure there's no contamination. Ooh, I spilled all my brushes. Cool. Okay, so I'm just going to grab a regular filbert. Now I want to go in, let's start at the back and work our way forward. So I've got this lighter brown, kind of a beige tone on here, and I want to be careful to, I tried to pick a brush that was nice and rough. You can see that when I show it this way, that's really quite sprayed, so that we're not getting like a tip, because if we get a tip, sometimes it'll do this. You'll get those kind of marks, and I want some looser marks. I do have a sable brush, actually. Maybe I should use that. Let's see how this goes. So I'm just gonna stipple it. Maybe I'll use my sable brush and see how that goes. So a sable brush is kind of like it's a really nice loose brush. So when you go in like this and you use the tip of it, you can see that because it's a rounded edge like this, you'll get some spots, you'll get a lot of variation, and it's a nice way to kind of get some stippling in your painting. So I've just gone in and I've just loaded up the end of it with that, and we'll see how that, yeah, I like that. That's kind of giving it some fuzzy, kind of that like fuzzy, whatever this is. It's almost like dandelion fuzz or something. Yeah, I like that. That's gorgeous. Hopefully you can see it. I feel like my webcam, let me know if the webcam, if you can see the impact that this is making. Okay. Yeah, I like that. That's really bringing it together. So just want to be delicate. I do have a little bit of the darker value in there. I don't want it to be too light, but maybe I should just grab the light value in there. Just those highlights. Helps to keep it random too. Don't get as patterned. There we go. So trying to think about where I see this. These lighter values. Don't want to go everywhere with it. Don't want to go crazy with it, or it starts to bring it out of that realm. But just a couple of key places where we see that. I can see a little bit on this side, and I still need to resolve that kind of shoot that comes out here. Got a little, oops, that was a big dollop. There we go. Yeah, I feel like I like that. Okay, now let's go in there for our carnations. Gonna grab my lightest highlights in here. Again, I don't want to do this everywhere, just where I'm seeing some highlights. I love the texture that we've created there. I really don't want to disturb it, so I just want to come in with some highlights. No, this isn't. Not quite showing up. Let's grab a little bit more paint on my brush, see if we can really kind of highlight that. And I don't want to like press too hard because I don't want to damage all of the beautiful texture that we've created in that area. Sure I got enough kind of on my brush. There we go. Starting to lighten it up a little bit. We've got quite a bit lighter on this side. Don't want to do too much. Just a little bit. Let's grab just a little hit on that side. There you go. Yeah, I like that. I like that. I like it a lot. Okay, so let's go in. Just wanna I feel like this just got a little too uniform. There we go. I do want to add some lighter hits just at the tip. The very tippy top there. There we go. Awesome. Okay, it's coming together. Now, this is bothering me because I need a darker hit of this shadow is just bleh. Anyways, we're working on our highlights, one thing at a time. Okay, so now our highlights in terms of the white of the flowers. Let's see if we can pull together these flowers. Just got some bright highlights in here, just where the light is coming in from this angle and it's hitting this side of those flowers. Just want to see if I can get that in there. I don't know if this is really the right tool for it. There we go. Now what's happening in here is this area is falling really flat to me because we've got so many values in here. And really what's happening is these shadows have lightened up, but then they should get much darker here where they pull into the bottom of the pumpkin. So I'm just going to go in with my darkest or my darker values in here. And I just want to make sure that I'm reestablishing some of the shadows in this area just to kind of deepen those recesses. And then there's an area in here where the leaf actually comes in like that and it kind of cinches up there. Thank you for everybody that's been following along. This was way longer, of course it always is. I'm always like, oh yeah, I'll get this done in an hour, and then 2 hours later, here I am. But if it's spent painting, it's a joy. And then I also want to just establish, maybe move in with some of this blue. There's the center of this flower in here is a little bit dark, so I want to get that variation in there as well. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna clean this brush off because I love this little angle. This little angle brush, and I've been using it for my darkest shadows, and I want to use it to try to get this. I want it to be lightest over here, so I don't want to. I didn't want to go too thick with it. Okay. There we go. Something like that. And then let's get some. Just grab some. Maybe I'll grab my sable brush again. I just want to get some nice little random leaves. Just with the way the light's catching it. Here we go. Cool. It got a little thicker than I wanted, but if I touch it, it's just going to keep getting wider and wider, so it's all good. It's all good. And I can even, I can even maybe go in. Do I dare? Do I dare? Go in with a slightly darker value and just kind of establish an underside of it. Just kind of cut into it like that. And I've kind of changed it just a little bit. Cool. I still want to darken up some of this in here. I just don't like the way this is all playing. Still with me, give me a shout. Give me a shout. He's still here. All right, now I'm just gonna start futzing. So I want to make sure that I darken that there. And then there's this is where I get into trouble when I start getting too into it. I don't want to, I just want to establish there's a lighter section here, kind of a darker shadow that's happening in there. There we go. So I'm just going to grab some of my black and I'm just going to reestablish that edge before it fully drives me crazy. I believe this was just pure black. Hopefully. So let's go in and reestablish this edge. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to deepen the shadow. It's just not quite dark enough yet to kind of, get deep into that, shadow there. Yeah, that's looking better. That feels a lot more like you've got a leaf in there. And then I just want to bring in my sable brush here. Let's not destroy our whole setting. Let's go in, and I just wanted to, what was I thinking? Oh, just bring in a little bit of that light value just up in there. Just connects that with some of these leaves here just a little better. There we go. It's looking better. And then one more thing is just this shadow back in here needs to come up that way. Just to separate this flower from this leaf. The fact that we've got a deep recess in here. We've got a dark shadow there. Okay, I think we're getting close. Somebody tell me to put the brushes down, or I'll just keep going. And then I'll ruin it. There we go. Okay. I do want to add a little bit of, see, this is a problem. I say this and then I can't put the brushes down. I do want to put a little bit of that. I'm missing, I feel like this area is just a little bit too muddy for me. I want to, I think I need to put some darker shadows back in here, maybe just a little bit down in here. To kind of set that back. And then is it maybe coming in with this? I feel like I'm going to get addicted to this sable brush. It could be a positive or a negative. Just add a little bit of variety there. Okay, I'm going to put it down. We're done. Okay. I'm not going to touch these sides. I need to really, feel like I have a solid game plan. So when I don't feel like I have a solid game plan, then usually it's time for me to stop. And then I'll kind of figure out how I want to place in those, I don't even know what they are, bulrush type plants. Just because I think I want to make sure that I have my context on my palette just so that I don't feel as much pressure to get it right the first time. I can always go in and fix it, and I always find that I get a better result when I feel like I have an exit strategy. So that is going to be, hi Victoria. Glad you were able to catch me live too. I am finished, but glad you were able to kind of join in. And for anybody, you can go ahead and go in and watch the replay. But thank you so much for watching, and hope everybody has a good rest of the night. All right, thanks friends. Take care.